Abundance. Mindset versus scarcity. Mindset. Which one will make you rich? There's a moment in everyone's life when a simple question hits harder than any financial setback, any obstacle, any failure. Why do some people effortlessly create wealth while others work twice as hard and barely move? And the truth, although many people don't want to admit it, is brutally simple. It's not luck. It's not privilege. It's not even intelligence. It's mindset. A mindset so deep, so subconscious, so automatic, that most people don't even realize it's dictating their entire financial destiny. Today, I want to talk to you like a friend who genuinely wants to see you win, because this is one of those videos that can flip a switch inside your mind. Once you understand what's really happening inside you, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to the old patterns. You will start thinking differently, acting differently, choosing differently. This video is about the silent, invisible battle between two forces that shape your wealth: the abundance mindset and the scarcity mindset. And the question that will define the rest of your life is this: which one controls you right now? Because one of them quietly destroys opportunities before you even see them, while the other turns ordinary people into millionaires, leaders, creators, innovators, and architects of their own reality. This is the same mindset shift that turned Oprah Winfrey from a child facing overwhelming hardship into one of the most influential and wealthy women in the world. It's the same mindset that allowed Amazon, Apple, Tesla, and Google to rise from garages and dorm rooms to becoming trillion-dollar empires. None of them started with perfect circumstances, but they started with a different inner world. A world built on expansion, possibility, vision, and the unshakable belief that more is always available. Today, I want to take you on a journey through 10 transformative insights that reveal the truth most people will never understand. If you watch this until the end, I promise you, something inside you will shift, something will open, and your life will not remain the same. Because wealth is not created in the bank, in the company, or in the economy. Wealth is created in the mind long before it shows up in your reality. Let's begin. Topic 1. The hidden psychological split between abundance and scarcity that quietly decides your wealth. There's a truth about wealth that people rarely talk about, not because it's complicated, but because it's almost too simple for the mind to grasp. And yet, it determines everything: your financial path, your confidence, your decisions, the opportunities you attract, the people you meet, the risks you take, the life you allow yourself to live. That truth is this: you don't see the world as it is. You see it as you are. And the you inside your mind, your beliefs, your patterns, your fears, your interpretations, is shaped by one of two invisible forces: abundance or scarcity. These two forces create two completely different internal realities, and whichever one controls you determines your entire relationship with success. The abundance mindset is like standing in a room filled with open doors. You may not know which door is the right one, but you can feel that possibilities exist. You can sense that something beyond your current circumstances is reachable. You have the inner permission to try. You believe that if you walk through one door and it doesn't work out, you can walk through another, and another. You believe growth is available. Opportunities expand. Money can be created. Skills can be learned. Life is not happening to you. It's happening through you. The scarcity mindset is the opposite. It feels like being locked in a small, dark room where the doors are sealed shut. You assume the little you have must be protected. You feel the need to hold tightly to what's familiar, even if it limits you. Every mistake feels catastrophic. Every risk feels dangerous. Every dream feels like a threat to your safety. Scarcity makes you see limitation everywhere, even when opportunity is right in front of you. And the tragedy is this: most people don't know they're in that dark room. They think they're being realistic. But realism is often just fear with a rational mask. Think of two people who receive the same opportunity. One sees it as a chance to grow, expand, and evolve. The other sees it as a chance to fail, look foolish, or lose money. They both see the same door, but their inner world determines whether they walk toward it or run away. Jeff Bezos once said that the thing he feared most was not failing, it was regret. That alone shows the difference in mindset. Scarcity fears the loss of what you have. Abundance fears the loss of what you could become. And that single shift explains why one person builds a trillion-dollar empire while another hesitates for years and never takes the first step. When you study the lives of millionaires who started with nothing, Oprah, Howard Schultz, Sarah Blakely, Damon John, you notice that none of them had perfect circumstances. Most had every logical reason to stay small, safe, and scared. Yet each of them, at some point, looked at their life and asked a question rooted not in fear, but in possibility. What if I can do more? That question is the heartbeat of abundance. It's the internal whisper that says, try. And the moment you hear that whisper, something inside you shifts. Your perception changes. The world begins to look bigger, more flexible, more open. Scarcity, however, whispers something very different. It says, be careful. It says, don't trust life. It says, if you try, you'll lose. It convinces you that the worst-case scenario is always the most realistic one. And when you believe the worst-case scenario, you unconsciously live as if it has already happened. You hesitate, you shrink, you delay, you avoid, you reject opportunities before they have the chance to reject you. Scarcity keeps you safe, yes, but it also keeps you small. And the price of safety is always your potential. The abundance mindset isn't about being naive or blindly optimistic. It's about recognizing that the world is dynamic and adaptable. Money moves, people change, skills grow, industries evolve, technology opens new paths every day. Abundance is the mindset that sees life not as a fixed pie, but as a constantly expanding universe. Look at companies like Tesla. When nearly every expert predicted its collapse, Elon Musk doubled down with unshakable conviction, not because he had guarantees, but because he had vision. Vision is the currency of abundance. Fear is the currency of scarcity. One multiplies wealth, the other destroys it. People with an abundance mindset understand that wealth isn't something you find, it's something you create. It is something you build through ideas, actions, connections, learning, resilience, and perspective. Scarcity people wait for the right moment. Abundance people create the moment. Scarcity people need certainty before they act. Abundance people understand that action creates certainty. Scarcity people obsess over what they might lose. Abundance people obsess over what they can become. And here's the part that many people overlook. Your current financial situation is not proof of your mindset. Your decisions, your habits, your reactions, your beliefs, those are the real indicators. I've met wealthy people with a deeply scarcity-driven mind, terrified of losing everything. I've met broke people with abundance running through their veins, already acting, thinking, and creating like the future millionaires they are becoming. Money doesn't create abundance. Abundance creates money. Money amplifies your existing mindset. If your mindset is rooted in fear, money will amplify that fear. If your mindset is rooted in expansion, money will amplify your expansion. Think about lottery winners. Countless studies show that around 70% of them go bankrupt within 5 years. Why? Because they received money without expanding the internal container that could hold it. They didn't shift their identity. They didn't evolve their beliefs. They didn't change their inner world. Meanwhile, self-made millionaires build wealth slowly, deliberately, intentionally, not because they're lucky, but because they've trained their inner world to support growth. They trust themselves. They trust their ability to create. They trust that life will reward their efforts. So ask yourself, what mindset is guiding your life today? Do you approach your goals with expansion or contraction? Are you acting like a creator or a protector? Are you living in a world of open doors or locked rooms? These questions aren't philosophical, they're financial. Your bank account is a reflection of your mindset long before it becomes a reflection of your effort. And the greatest secret of millionaire psychology is this: the moment you shift your inner world from scarcity to abundance, your external world begins to shift with it. Topic 2. How your thoughts about money create your reality. Long before the money arrives, before a single dollar enters your life, before any opportunity appears, before any door opens, something far more important happens. You think, you imagine, you anticipate, you interpret. And whether you realize it or not, every financial breakthrough you will ever experience begins as an invisible pattern in the mind. Your thoughts about money are not passive. They are instructions. They shape your behavior, your confidence, your emotional state, the actions you take, the risks you avoid, the opportunities you either recognize or overlook. In other words, your financial reality is built inside you before it ever shows up around you. This is why two people can look at the exact same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes. One sees an obstacle and gives up. The other sees the same obstacle and finds a way through it, around it, above it, or beyond it. The only difference is the story they tell themselves. Scarcity tells one story. Money is hard. Opportunities are rare. Wealth is for the lucky or the privileged. Success is not guaranteed. I need to protect myself. Abundance tells another story entirely. Money flows. Opportunities evolve. Wealth is created. Success is built. I can change. I can grow. These internal narratives are not harmless. They dictate what you do next. Think of the early days of Netflix. When Blockbuster rejected their partnership, most people in their position would have folded under the pressure of a giant competitor. But Netflix didn't see Blockbuster as a threat. Their internal narrative wasn't based on fear, even though the odds were stacked against them. They saw potential. They saw the future. They believed people would eventually prefer streaming. That belief guided their decisions. That decision changed an industry. That industry change created billions. And it all began with a mindset, an inner story about what was possible. Your thoughts about money are doing the same thing in your life. Right now, at this very moment, they are shaping how you interpret your daily experiences. They are defining what you believe you can achieve. They are determining how long you persist when something gets difficult. If your inner story says, "I'll never earn more than this," then every action you take will reflect that belief. You won't negotiate. You won't invest. You won't start the business. You won't learn the skill. You won't take the leap. You won't see the tiny opportunities that often become life-changing ones. But if your inner story says, "There must be a way," then you will look for that way. And human beings always find what they are looking for. Scarcity looks for what's missing. Abundance looks for what's possible. That alone explains why some people rise. Not because they know more, not because they have more, but because they think in a way that leads them to see more. When Oprah talks about growing up in poverty, she often says that even when she had nothing, she somehow believed she was meant for something bigger. That belief wasn't arrogance. It was awareness, a seed planted in her mind that refused to die, even when her circumstances contradicted it. Most people don't realize that their mindset is either watering or starving the seeds of their future. Scarcity starves, abundance waters, and what you water grows. Your thoughts about money influence your emotions, and your emotions influence your actions. If you think money is scarce, you will feel stress, anxiety, and tension around it. Those emotions create defensive behaviors. You avoid risks. You avoid growth. You avoid asking for more. You avoid trying new things. You avoid uncertainty. You play small, not because you lack potential, but because your thoughts convinced you that expansion is unsafe. But if you think money flows, grows, and circulates, your emotional state changes. You feel possibility, curiosity, creativity, motivation, courage. Those emotions fuel actions that move you forward. You learn faster. You take calculated risks. You connect with people. You ask better questions. You seek better opportunities. You behave like someone who expects growth, and life responds. Think of someone like Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. Before she became a billionaire, she wasn't surrounded by wealth. She was selling fax machines door to door, receiving rejection after rejection. But she had one thought that changed her entire destiny. There's got to be a better way. That thought didn't magically give her money. It gave her movement. It pushed her into action. It guided her through challenges. It opened her mind to innovation. It helped her see something no one else saw, an idea waiting to be born. Had her thoughts been rooted in scarcity, she would have dismissed her idea immediately. Instead, she pursued it until the world saw what she saw. Your financial life follows the same pattern. Most people sabotage their wealth long before they ever attempt to build it. They think small, and so they act small. They fear loss, and so they never experiment. They doubt themselves, and so they never grow enough to become someone capable of receiving more. The irony is that the scarcity mindset tries to protect you from failure, but it ends up guaranteeing it, because refusing to try is the fastest path to staying stuck. Abundance does the opposite. It opens your mind, It widens your lens. It helps you see what others overlook. It gives you the emotional courage to keep going when things get challenging. Wealthy people aren't smarter. They just have a mindset that allows them to stay in the game long enough for success to catch up with them. They think in a way that aligns with growth. So the real question is simple. What is your mind aligning you with right now? Are your thoughts training you to see opportunities or threats? Are you programming yourself for expansion or contraction? Are you thinking like someone who is preparing for wealth or someone who is protecting themselves from disappointment? Everything you want begins with a single shift in how you think about money. One new thought can open a door you never knew existed. One new belief can transform the choices you make. One new internal story can redirect the path of your entire life. Your financial future is already being written in your mind, and the moment you change the story changes you. Topic 3. Why scarcity keeps you stuck in survival mode, and how abundance unlocks wealth instantly. One of the most painful truths about the human mind is that you can be incredibly talented, intelligent, hardworking, ambitious, even gifted, and still remain stuck, years behind your potential, simply because your mindset keeps you trapped in survival mode. Scarcity is a psychological prison that feels so familiar, so normal, so socially accepted, that most people don't even know they're living inside it. And yet, it silently shapes every decision they make. Scarcity doesn't just limit your finances. It limits your creativity, your confidence, your relationships, your risk tolerance, and your belief in what's possible for your life. To understand why scarcity is so destructive, you must first understand what survival mode actually is. Survival mode is a state where your brain believes that life is dangerous, uncertain, and threatening. In this state, your mind doesn't care about abundance, creativity, wealth building, or long-term goals. It only cares about one thing: staying safe. And when your brain is trying to keep you safe, it shuts down the part of your mind responsible for vision, innovation, courage, long-term thinking, and strategic action. Scarcity turns your inner world into a battlefield where every decision becomes a potential threat, not an opportunity. Think about how many times you've had an idea that could have changed everything. A business concept, a skill you wanted to learn, a course you wanted to take, a connection you wanted to reach out to, an investment you wanted to make. And the moment the idea was born, a voice inside you whispered, "Be careful." That voice isn't wisdom. It isn't intuition. It's fear disguised as logic. And the cruel truth is that fear sounds incredibly reasonable when it's coming from inside your own mind. Scarcity convinces you that taking any step toward your dreams is too risky, that trying something new will embarrass you, that reaching higher will expose you, that wanting more means you're being unrealistic. Scarcity keeps you emotionally tied to your comfort zone, even when that comfort zone is slowly suffocating your potential. And because survival mode feels responsible, safe, and rational, you don't even realize how much wealth you're pushing away with every cautious decision. But the most dangerous part of scarcity is this. It makes you believe that your current circumstances determine your future. It tells you that because you don't have much now, you won't have much later. That because your past was hard, your future will be too. That because your parents or environment didn't have money, you won't either. But circumstances don't shape your mindset. Your mindset shapes your circumstances. The people who rise out of poverty, who build empires from nothing, who turn ideas into million-dollar companies, all understand this truth. They didn't wait for their reality to change before they changed their mindset. They changed their mindset first, and reality followed. Look at Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks. He grew up in a poor family in a Brooklyn housing project with no financial safety net. By all logical standards, scarcity should have defined him forever. But Schultz didn't think like someone trapped by his environment. He thought like someone who could create something bigger. When he had the vision to transform Starbucks from a small coffee bean retailer into a global cafe experience, he faced rejection after rejection from investors. A scarcity mindset would have said, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should give up." But an abundance mindset said, "They don't see it yet." That single belief gave him the endurance to keep going. And because he kept going, the world eventually saw what he saw. That's the magic of abundance. It unlocks possibilities that scarcity can't even perceive. Scarcity closes your eyes and tells you the world is small. Abundance opens your eyes and shows you how big life can be. Scarcity makes you think you're one mistake away from failure. Abundance makes you realize you're one decision away from transformation. Scarcity keeps you stuck in fear. Abundance pulls you forward with vision. Survival mode is reactive. Abundance mode is creative. When you're in survival mode, every challenge feels like a threat. When you're in abundance mode, every challenge feels like a puzzle. Survival mode asks, how do I avoid losing? Abundance mode asks, how do I grow from this? Survival mode drains you. Abundance mode energizes you. And the moment you step into abundance, even in the smallest way, you begin to create momentum that changes your life. This is why people like Steve Jobs, Sarah Blakely, Oprah Winfrey, and Richard Branson succeeded even without perfect beginnings. They didn't allow scarcity to define their identity. They didn't allow survival mode to control their imagination. They carried an inner certainty that life had more to offer. They believed there was a version of themselves they hadn't met yet, and that belief guided every step they took. Scarcity tells you the world is dangerous. Abundance tells you the world is dynamic. Scarcity says, don't try. Abundance says, why not? Scarcity tells you to stay where you are. Abundance tells you to grow into who you can become. Scarcity kills dreams quietly, slowly, politely, convincing you that you're doing the responsible thing. Abundance resurrects dreams you buried years ago. The truth is that abundance doesn't require money to begin. It requires a decision, a shift, a new way of interpreting your life. The moment you stop thinking from fear and start thinking from possibility, your life begins to reorganize itself around your new mindset. You start seeing opportunities you ignored before. You start attracting people with vision. You start feeling more creative, more motivated, more alive. The world feels bigger. Your goals feel closer. Your identity expands. Scarcity limits your life to what you've already experienced. Abundance connects you to everything you can become. And the second you choose abundance, even silently, even privately, your life begins to transform from the inside out. Topic 4. How millionaires think differently. The invisible patterns that separate wealth from struggle. If you truly want to understand the difference between people who become wealthy and people who stay stuck, you need to go beyond habits, behaviors, or productivity tips. Those matter, of course, but they are surface-level expressions of something much deeper. Wealth doesn't start with routines. It starts with patterns, invisible mental patterns that the wealthy practice automatically, often without even realizing they're doing it. These patterns shape how they think, how they feel, how they react, and how they make decisions. And once you learn to adopt these patterns, your entire financial reality begins to shift. Millionaires think differently because they see differently. They interpret the world through a lens that expands possibility instead of shrinking it. They don't approach life with fear as their advisor. They approach life with curiosity, vision, and a sense of personal agency. They believe they can influence the outcome, even when the outcome is uncertain. And that belief changes everything, because your decisions reflect what you believe you're capable of. One of the first mindset patterns the wealthy share is this: they emphasize long-term thinking over short-term emotion. Most people make decisions based on how they feel in the moment. Fear arises, and they retreat. Doubt appears, and they quit. Discomfort shows up, and they stop. But millionaires have trained themselves to detach emotionally from temporary discomfort, so they can stay committed to long-term possibility. They understand that the feeling of fear is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that they're stretching into new territory. They don't let momentary emotion dictate permanent outcomes. Think about Warren Buffett. One of the wealthiest and most successful investors in history, built his fortune not by chasing trends or reacting impulsively, but by seeing value where others saw volatility. When fear caused the majority of people to pull out of the market, Buffett leaned in. He didn't allow scarcity-driven panic to shape his decisions. His thinking was rooted in patience, observation, and long-term perspective. He saw opportunity where others saw danger because his mind wasn't controlled by emotional survival mode. It was guided by strategic abundance. Another powerful pattern millionaires share is their relationship with failure. For most people, failure feels final. It feels like a personal rejection, a sign that they aren't good enough or that success isn't meant for them. But wealthy individuals view failure as data, information, feedback. They treat failure not as the end, but as a neutral event that reveals what needs to be adjusted. They don't internalize it, they don't take it personally. They move with the understanding that failure is part of the process, not a verdict on their worth or potential. Think about the story of James Dyson. Before his vacuum company became a multi-billion-dollar empire, Dyson created over 5,000 failed prototypes. Most people would have given up after the first dozen. Dyson's continued through thousands. Why? Because he didn't think like a person who feared failure. He thought like a person who expected success. Every failure wasn't a sign to stop. It was a sign he was getting closer. That is abundance thinking in its purest form, seeing progress where others see punishment. Another invisible pattern shared by the wealthy is their belief in growth. They don't see themselves as fixed or limited. They don't accept the narrative that their intelligence, capabilities, or resources are static. They believe they can evolve, learn, adapt, and rise. And this belief gives them a level of confidence that most people only wish they had. When they meet challenges, they don't ask, "Can I handle this?" They ask, "What must I learn to grow into the person who can handle this?" That question alone sets them on a trajectory of constant expansion. Look at Elon Musk. Whether you agree with him or not, one thing is undeniable. He doesn't think like the average person. He doesn't look at industries and ask, "Is this possible?" He asks, "How do we make this possible?" From electric cars to reusable rockets to brain-computer interfaces, Musk operates from a mindset that sees future potential instead of current limitation. That mindset creates breakthroughs. It creates wealth. It creates reality-shifting innovations. And while not everyone needs to think as radically as Musk, the underlying principle remains the same. Abundance asks better questions. Another difference in the thinking patterns of millionaires is their relationship with risk. Scarcity sees risk as something to fear. Abundance sees risk as something to manage. Scarcity asks, "What if it goes wrong?" Abundance asks, "What if it goes right?" These two questions lead to two completely different lives. Wealthy individuals do not take reckless risks, they take calculated risks. They study, they prepare, they test, but they also act. They move. They step into the unknown with courage, not because they're fearless, but because they trust their ability to learn and adapt. People like Richard Branson built multi-billion-dollar empires by embracing calculated risk. Virgin wasn't a guaranteed success. Virgin Airlines wasn't a safe bet. Virgin Galactic certainly wasn't a predictable move. Yet each venture was guided by a mind that didn't fixate on what could go wrong. It focused on what could go magnificently right. Scarcity never would have created those companies. Abundance did. Another mental pattern of millionaires is their ability to see themselves as creators rather than consumers. Scarcity-minded individuals often believe that life is happening to them. They wait for opportunities. They hope for the right moment. They rely on luck, timing, or external validation. Millionaires operate the opposite way. They believe life is happening for them and through them. They don't wait for circumstances to line up perfectly. They build the circumstances. They design their environment. They create opportunities. They decide who they want to become, and then they move in the direction of that identity. This is why so many wealthy individuals started with almost nothing, because they didn't base their actions on where they were. They based them on where they were going. They didn't think from their present circumstances. They thought from their future identity. That is one of the most powerful abundance patterns you can adopt. When you begin to think from your future instead of your past, your decisions change, your energy changes, your confidence changes, and your results follow. The final invisible pattern millionaires share is their relationship with value. Scarcity believes value is limited. Abundance believes value is created. Scarcity thinks, "I must compete for the small piece of the pie." Abundance thinks, "I can expand the pie." This single shift transforms how wealthy people approach business, relationships, leadership, creativity, and problem-solving. They focus on contribution, not competition. They focus on building, not defending. They focus on solving problems, not avoiding them. And the world pays massively for solutions. When you adopt these patterns, even slowly, even imperfectly, you step into the psychological field where wealth is created. The moment you begin thinking like someone who can grow, adapt, solve, innovate, and create, you step into alignment with the same inner patterns that turn ordinary individuals into extraordinary success stories. Topic 5. How your identity shapes your wealth, the self-image that either attracts money or rejects it. There is a moment in every person's journey toward wealth when they face a realization so profound that it feels almost uncomfortable to accept. You do not get what you want. You get what you believe yourself to be. You can desire abundance, dream of success, visualize wealth, and set goals that stretch far beyond your current life. But none of that matters if your identity, the deepest image you hold of yourself, does not match the future you are trying to create. Your identity is the thermostat of your financial life, and just like a thermostat, it will always pull you back to the temperature you believe you deserve. Most people never rise financially because they keep trying to upgrade their income while keeping the same internal identity. They want to earn more, but they still see themselves as someone who struggles. They want to build a business, but still identify as someone who isn't an entrepreneur. They want to invest, but see themselves as someone who isn't good with money. They want abundance, but they see themselves through the lens of scarcity. Identity always overrides intention. You will never outperform the story you tell about yourself. This truth becomes obvious when you study the lives of self-made millionaires. Almost every one of them had to create a new identity long before the money ever arrived. Oprah wasn't Oprah when she was growing up. She became Oprah internally first. Howard Schultz wasn't a global CEO while working in a Brooklyn housing project. He became one in his mind long before the world recognized him. Sarah Blakely didn't wait until she was a billionaire to see herself as a creator. She saw herself as a creator first, then became a billionaire later. This pattern repeats over and over again. Identity first, wealth second. Why does identity matter so much? Because your identity determines what you are willing to try, what you are willing to risk, what you are willing to tolerate, and what you are willing to become. If you identify as someone who never gets opportunities, you won't notice the ones that appear. If you identify as someone who always fails, your brain will find ways to sabotage your success to keep that identity intact. If you identify as someone who isn't worthy of abundance, you will push away or downplay every opportunity that could elevate your life. The scarcity mindset creates a scarcity identity. A person who sees the world through limitation eventually begins to see themselves as limited. They internalize their circumstances as identity. If they grew up poor, they assume that poor is who they are. If they've failed before, they assume failure is what they deserve. If they've been rejected, they assume they're not good enough. Scarcity convinces you that your past defines your future, because it convinces you that your past defines you. Abundance, however, creates an evolving identity. A person with an abundance mindset sees themselves as someone who can change, grow, expand, and reinvent. They don't define themselves by their circumstances. They define themselves by their potential. Abundance says, "This is who I was, but not who I must continue to be." That one belief, simple, powerful, liberating, creates an internal blueprint for transformation. When you believe you can become more, you naturally begin to act like someone who is becoming more. Identity is why affirmations work for some people and fail for others. You can't just say, "I am wealthy," if your identity still says, "I am broke." You can't just say, "I am successful," if your identity still says, "I am not enough." The subconscious mind rejects statements that contradict deeply held identity. But when you shift the identity first, when you begin to genuinely see yourself as someone capable, worthy, intelligent, resourceful, and powerful, your mind stops resisting change and starts reinforcing it. Think of the story of Damon John from Shark Tank. He was sewing hats in his mother's house in Queens, selling them on the street, making barely enough to survive. But internally, he didn't identify as a broke kid or a struggling entrepreneur. He identified as a hustler, a creator, a builder, someone who was meant to take ideas and turn them into something bigger. That identity pushed him to keep going when most people would have quit. And because his identity aligned with success, he acted in ways that eventually made success inevitable. Your identity is not fixed. It is not your destiny. It is your starting point. But most people never question the identity they inherited from childhood, from society, from their parents, from their failures, or from their past selves. They walk through life with outdated self-images that no longer match the person they are capable of becoming. They try to build a future from the mindset of their past, and it doesn't work. To create wealth, you must update the identity that lives inside you. You must begin to see yourself in a new light. You must believe that you are someone who can learn, adapt, grow, earn, invest, create, and rise. You must build an identity that supports abundance, not scarcity. Because everything you do, your habits, your decisions, your risks, your discipline, flows from the identity you hold. When you see yourself as someone who deserves abundance, you begin to allow abundance. You make decisions from strength instead of fear. You take opportunities instead of avoiding them. You raise your standards. You treat your time differently. You speak differently. You think differently. You behave like someone who is building wealth, not someone hoping for it. Wealth is attracted to identity alignment. When you align your self-image with the life you want, your actions naturally rise to match it. Identity is the foundation of all transformation. Once you rewrite the story of who you believe you are, the world responds accordingly. Your financial ceiling rises. Your confidence strengthens. Your decisions improve. Your opportunities multiply. And the version of you that once felt small, unsure, or unworthy begins to dissolve. Who you become internally determines who you become externally. And the moment you choose to become the version of yourself who lives in abundance, before the money arrives, before the opportunities appear, before the world validates you, that is the moment your true wealth journey begins. Topic 6. The money patterns you learned in childhood. How early conditioning controls your financial destiny until you break the cycle. Every person walking on this planet carries a financial blueprint inside their mind. Not a blueprint created by their current intelligence, not shaped by their adult decisions, not molded by their goals or aspirations. No. This blueprint is much older, much deeper, and much more powerful than most people realize. It was formed in childhood, written long before you had the ability to question anything, and it still governs your relationship with money today. Until you become conscious of it, until you challenge it, until you rewrite it, this blueprint quietly determines your financial destiny. Think about it. When you were a child, you absorbed everything around you like a sponge. You observed how your parents spoke about money, how they argued about it, how they felt about it, how they behaved with it. You learned whether money was something that flowed or something that disappeared. You learned whether success was normal or for other people. You learned whether wealth was admirable or suspicious, desirable or shameful, empowering or dangerous. You learned whether abundance was possible or impossible. And all of this conditioning happened without your permission. If your parents constantly said, "Money doesn't grow on trees," then scarcity began writing its script inside you. If they lived in fear of bills, fear of losing their job, fear of unexpected expenses, then that fear became part of your emotional DNA. If they believed that wealthy people were greedy, dishonest, or selfish, then part of you began to associate wealth with negativity, even if you consciously want abundance today. If they taught you that working hard is the only way to make money, then you might still feel guilty pursuing opportunities that rely on creativity, leverage, or strategy instead of physical effort. These early messages don't just influence your beliefs, they shape your identity. They become the automatic settings that determine how you think, feel, and act around money for the rest of your life. And because they were installed so early, you never stop to question them. You simply live inside the mental world that was handed to you. This is why people from scarcity-based households often recreate the same financial struggles in adulthood, even when they have opportunities to create abundance. The inner thermostat pulls them back to the familiar. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for the financial program you inherited. You are responsible for the one you choose to keep. And the moment you become aware of your conditioning, you gain the power to change it. Let's look at an example. Imagine a child growing up in a home where money was always a source of stress, where every purchase was followed by fear, where every bill caused tension, where every financial conversation turned into an argument. That child doesn't grow up thinking money is neutral. They grow up thinking money danger. As an adult, that person might sabotage opportunities because abundance feels unsafe. They might undercharge for their work, avoid asking for raises, or fear success because of the emotional weight attached to money. They're not lazy. They're not unmotivated. They're simply trapped in an unconscious pattern designed to keep them safe. Now think of someone like Jim Carrey. He grew up in poverty, living in a van for part of his childhood. His family struggled deeply, and the financial stress was overwhelming. Yet Carrey didn't internalize poverty as identity. Instead, at a young age, he developed a vision of what life could be. He famously wrote himself a check for $10 million before he ever became successful. That wasn't just a gesture. It was a reprogramming of his identity. He chose abundance, even when his circumstances screamed the opposite. And because he transformed his inner world first, his outer world eventually caught up. This same pattern appears in countless success stories. People who took the financial patterns they were given and consciously rewrote them. They refused to allow childhood conditioning to dictate adult outcomes. They chose a new identity. They chose a new story. They chose abundance. The scarcity mindset learned in childhood teaches you to be cautious, fearful, and small. It whispers, "Don't dream too big." It says, "Stay where you are." It convinces you that financial security is better than financial freedom, even if the cost is your potential. But the abundance mindset teaches you the opposite. It shows you that life is not defined by where you started. It is defined by where you choose to go. It shows you that money is not moral or immoral. It is a tool, a resource, a flow of energy that responds to creativity and contribution. It shows you that your past is not your future unless you allow it to be. Most people never question the financial patterns they inherited because they feel familiar, and familiarity feels safe. But comfort is the enemy of growth. If you want to step into abundance, you must become willing to question the truths you learned as a child. You must ask yourself, does this belief support the future I want, or does it support the limitations of my past? This is why generational cycles of poverty persist, not because people lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they inherit identities rooted in limitation. And unless someone consciously breaks the pattern, the cycle continues. But the moment someone chooses abundance, even if they don't fully believe it yet, even if they're scared, even if they're uncertain, the cycle begins to crack. And once a cycle cracks, it can break forever. Imagine a child watching a parent pursue a dream, take a risk, build a business, invest wisely, or talk positively about money. That child grows up believing that abundance is normal, that success is available, that opportunities are everywhere. That wealth is a mindset before it is a reality. That money can be created, managed, multiplied, and enjoyed. They inherit a blueprint of expansion instead of contraction, and their life unfolds with different possibilities because their mind was programmed with different expectations. You have the power to become the person who breaks the cycle. You have the power to rewrite your internal script. You have the power to question the beliefs you were given and replace them with beliefs that elevate you. You have the power to create a new financial identity, one rooted in abundance, confidence, clarity, and possibility. And once you shift your relationship with money internally, your external world cannot help but change. Abundance begins with awareness. Freedom begins with choice. Wealth begins with identity. And once you take control of the blueprint that shaped your past, you unlock the blueprint that will shape your future. Topic 7. The energy of money. Why your emotional state determines what you attract or repel. There is a truth about money that most people have never stopped to consider. Not because it's hidden, but because it requires a level of self-awareness that many avoid. Money responds to your energy. It is not just a physical currency, it is an emotional one. It flows to people who operate from confidence, creativity, clarity, vision, and expansion. And it retreats from people who operate from fear, contraction, confusion, doubt, and emotional turbulence. You can take the right actions, learn the right skills, follow the right steps, and still watch money slip through your fingers if your emotional energy is out of alignment with abundance. Everything you attract or repel in life begins with the state you live in. If your emotional energy is rooted in fear, fear of losing money, fear of not having enough, fear of failing, fear of looking foolish, then your actions will reflect that energy. You will hesitate. You will doubt yourself. You will avoid opportunities. You will play small. You will sabotage progress because your emotional body is trying to keep you safe. Fear lowers your vibration, and money cannot stay where fear dominates. But when your emotional energy is rooted in abundance, meaning confidence, clarity, gratitude, inspiration, curiosity, possibility, your actions also align with that state. You take risks not recklessly, but intelligently. You pursue opportunities not from desperation, but from empowerment. You communicate with a different tone, a different presence, a different magnetism. You become someone people want to work with, follow, hire, support, recommend, invest in. Abundance expands your energetic field, and money flows toward expansion. Think of someone like Oprah Winfrey again. One of the reasons she became so influential and so wealthy is because of her emotional frequency. People feel safe around her. They feel uplifted. They feel inspired. They feel expanded. Oprah isn't wealthy just because she had talent. She's wealthy because she mastered her inner energy. She didn't let bitterness, anger, scarcity, or fear define her emotional vibration. She chose empowerment over resentment. She chose possibility over limitation. Her emotional state became her greatest asset, shaping not only her career, but her entire financial destiny. Money responds to emotional leadership. When you lead your emotions, money follows. When your emotions lead you, money hides. Look at the business world. The CEOs of companies like Tesla, Apple, Google, and Microsoft aren't just leaders. They're energetic anchors. They walk into a room with conviction, clarity, and vision. They communicate ideas with enthusiasm and certainty. Their presence makes people believe in possibilities they never considered before. They hold an internal frequency that says, more is possible. Growth is inevitable. Solutions exist. That emotional leadership creates cultures of innovation, attracts top talent, inspires investors, and shapes billion-dollar outcomes. On the opposite end, leaders operating from fear, insecurity, or scarcity create environments filled with chaos, stress, and confusion. Teams under them become reactive instead of creative. Ideas die before they are explored. People avoid taking risks, growth stalls, energy shrinks, and money avoids environments where the emotional field is weak or unstable. This same principle applies not just to corporations, but to individuals. Your emotional state is the invisible advertisement you send to the world. It tells people how to respond to you. It tells opportunities whether to approach or avoid you. It tells money whether you are ready to hold it or not. If your internal energy is chaotic, money senses instability and leaves. If your energy is grounded, confident, and abundant, money senses safety and stays. Consider the story of Sarah Blakely again. Beyond her resilience and her creativity, one of the greatest reasons she succeeded is because she protected her emotional energy. She famously said that she didn't tell anyone about her Spanx idea for a long time, not because she was secretive, but because she understood that other people's doubts could contaminate her emotional frequency. She knew she needed to stay in a state of confidence and belief in order to bring her idea to life. And she was right. Had she shared her dream too early with people who were stuck in scarcity, their fear could have infected her mindset. Instead, she stayed aligned with abundance until she had the momentum to make the world believe. This is why emotional alignment is not a luxury. It is a wealth strategy. When your emotional state aligns with abundance, you begin to speak differently. You negotiate differently. You make decisions differently. You attract relationships that elevate you. You release relationships that drain you. You see paths where you once saw problems. You notice doors where you once saw walls. You move with a presence that says, I expect good things. And the universe responds to expectation. Gratitude is one of the highest emotional frequencies, and it is one of the most powerful attractors of abundance. When you live in gratitude, you tell life, I appreciate what I have. I am open to more. Gratitude expands your awareness. It dissolves fear. It shifts your emotional state from contraction to openness. Millionaires use gratitude not as a spiritual cliche, but as a psychological tool to keep their energy aligned with possibility instead of fear. Another powerful emotional state that attracts money is curiosity. Curiosity opens your mind to new solutions, new opportunities, new strategies. Scarcity closes the mind. Abundance expands it. When you're curious, you ask better questions. You explore alternatives. You learn faster. You innovate. You connect dots others don't see. Many great fortunes began with curiosity, a simple desire to understand how something works, how something could improve, or how something could evolve. Confidence is another emotional frequency that draws money in. Confidence doesn't mean knowing everything. It means trusting yourself to figure things out. When you radiate confidence, you activate opportunities that would have otherwise passed you by. People trust confident energy. Investors follow it. Customers respond to it. Partners gravitate toward it. Confidence is magnetic. Contrast this with emotional states rooted in scarcity, worry, doubt, resentment, jealousy, desperation. These energies repel money, not metaphorically, literally. Desperation pushes opportunities away because it signals instability. Resentment blocks abundance because it focuses your energy on what's missing instead of what's possible. Jealousy disconnects you from your own power. Worry keeps your mind trapped in fear loops instead of solution loops. Doubt destroys momentum at the very moment you need it most. Your emotional state is not just a feeling, it is a frequency, and you cannot attract abundance while broadcasting the frequency of scarcity. This is why mindset work is emotional work. It's why wealth begins with inner alignment. It's why millionaires spend so much time protecting their mental and emotional environment. They understand that their internal frequency determines their external results. The moment you shift your emotional vibration from fear to abundance, from stress to clarity, from doubt to trust, from resentment to gratitude, from contraction to expansion, you begin to attract opportunities, ideas, people, and solutions that were invisible to you before. You raise your frequency, and your reality rises with it. Abundance is not just a mindset. It is an emotional state. And when you embody it, wealth becomes not something you chase, but something you naturally receive. Topic 8. Why your environment determines your abundance, and how to build a life that supports wealth instead of destroying it. One of the most overlooked truths about wealth is that your environment is always shaping you. Not sometimes, not occasionally, always. Every day, without pause, the people around you, the conversations you hear, the habits you witness, the energy you absorb, and the beliefs you interact with are influencing how you think, how you act, and what you believe is possible for your life. Most people don't realize it, but they're not just living in an environment, they are becoming their environment. And if that environment is rooted in scarcity, negativity, fear, limitation, or mediocrity, it silently pulls you downward, no matter how big your dreams are. You can have ambition, but if you are surrounded by people who constantly talk about how the economy is bad, or success is for the lucky, or wealthy people are greedy, or nothing ever works out, that environment begins to erode your mindset like slow, invisible corrosion. You can have big goals, but if the people around you spend all their time complaining about life instead of creating life, you will eventually start to adjust your expectations downward. You can want abundance, but if you spend your days in environments that celebrate comfort, gossip, excuses, or fear, you will unconsciously begin to conform. Human beings are wired for belonging. We adapt to our tribe. We match the energy of the room. We absorb the beliefs of those we interact with most frequently. And this means that if your environment is filled with scarcity, you will have to fight twice as hard to maintain an abundant mindset. Not because you're weak, not because you're unmotivated, but because your mind responds to what it sees most often. Look at the world's most successful individuals, and you will notice something remarkable. They curate their environment intentionally. They don't allow random influences to shape their minds. They don't spend time with people who drain their energy or shrink their vision. They choose mentors, peers, and communities that elevate them. They deliberately place themselves in environments that challenge them, inspire them, and expand their possibilities. Consider Jeff Bezos in the early days of Amazon. He surrounded himself with innovators, problem solvers, and visionaries. His environment wasn't filled with people who said, "But what if this fails?" It was filled with people who asked, "How do we make this bigger?" That environment helped Amazon grow from a small online bookstore to one of the most influential companies in the world. Bezos didn't rise alone. He rose through an environment that supported upward momentum. Or look at Oprah. One of her greatest strengths has always been her ability to build an environment of emotional intelligence, compassion, inspiration, and empowerment around her. The people in her circle weren't driven by fear or limitation. They were driven by impact, purpose, and possibility. Her environment elevated her, challenged her, and kept her aligned with abundance. This was not an accident. It was a choice. Your environment will either pull you up or pull you down. There is no neutral. The people you surround yourself with are shaping your financial thermostat, raising it or lowering it every single day. If you are surrounded by people who normalize mediocrity, you will never feel safe aiming for excellence. If you are surrounded by people who see risk as danger, you will never feel comfortable taking the steps necessary for abundance. If you are surrounded by people who complain more than they create, you will gradually become someone who finds excuses easier than action. This is why growing into abundance often requires outgrowing certain people. Not because you are better than them, not because you don't care about them, but because you cannot grow in an environment that refuses to grow with you. It doesn't matter how hard you work, how smart you are, how much potential you carry. If you are surrounded by voices that shrink your dreams will slowly suffocate. But the opposite is also true. If you are surrounded by dreamers, creators, problem solvers, thinkers, innovators, learners, doers, believers, your mindset begins to expand naturally. You start to believe bigger. You start to act bigger. You start to take risks you would have avoided. You start to see opportunities you didn't recognize before. Your environment becomes fertile soil for abundance. This is why so many self-made millionaires moved away from their hometowns, changed their circles, or switched environments. They realized that the environment that shaped who they were could not support who they were becoming. Elon Musk didn't build PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink by surrounding himself with people who believed things were impossible. He surrounded himself with people who believed that impossible is just a word used by those who stop trying. That environment didn't just support abundance, it accelerated it. Your environment doesn't just influence what you think, it influences what you think is normal. If everyone around you talks about scarcity, you internalize scarcity as reality. If everyone around you talks about abundance, you internalize abundance as reality. Your environment becomes your reference point, and your reference point becomes your truth. This is why you must become intentional about who you allow into your space. You must protect your energy. You must curate your influences. You must choose your circle as carefully as you choose your goals. This doesn't mean cutting people out of your life with coldness. It means recognizing that not everyone is meant to walk every chapter with you. Some people belong in your history, not your destiny. To build an environment of abundance, you must seek out people who elevate you, people who challenge you, people who inspire you, people who push you to think differently, act differently, and become more. People who refuse to settle. People who see greatness in you, even when you doubt yourself. People who believe that life is full of possibility, even when circumstances are difficult. When you surround yourself with these kinds of people, abundance becomes the new normal. Your environment also includes what you consume, the books you read, the videos you watch, the conversations you listen to, the voices you allow to influence your thinking. If you constantly consume negativity, fear, drama, or pessimism, your mindset will reflect those inputs. If you consume inspiration, education, innovation, strategy, and personal growth, your mind will expand. You become what you repeatedly absorb. Abundance is contagious, but so is scarcity, and the quality of your environment determines which one you catch. The moment you choose to build an environment that supports your growth instead of your limitations, your life begins to shift. Opportunities appear, ideas emerge, confidence grows, vision expands. You begin to rise, not because you suddenly became more capable, but because your environment allowed your potential to breathe. Surround yourself with abundance, and abundance becomes your reality. Topic 9. The science of expansion. How your brain physically changes when you shift from scarcity to abundance. One of the most fascinating discoveries in neuroscience is that your brain is not fixed. It is not locked into the patterns you inherited from childhood, nor is it imprisoned by the beliefs you adopted in your past. Your brain is plastic. It rewires itself according to what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. And this means something extraordinary. When you shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, your brain physically transforms. New pathways form. New emotional patterns emerge. New possibilities become available. Your identity expands. Your creativity ignites. Your confidence strengthens. And your entire relationship with the world begins to change. Scarcity and abundance are not just ideas. They are neural circuits. They are literal patterns in your brain. Scarcity activates the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fear, threat detection, and survival. When you're in survival mode, your brain narrows its focus. It reduces creativity, limits innovation, and shuts down long-term thinking. You become hyper-aware of dangers, but blind to opportunities. You think small, you feel tense, and you behave reactively. The world becomes a place full of risks instead of possibilities. And because the brain seeks consistency, this state begins to reinforce itself over time. The more you think scarcity, the more your brain becomes wired for scarcity. But abundance activates a completely different part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. This is the center of vision, problem-solving, strategy, emotional regulation, creativity, and innovation. When you think in terms of abundance, your brain expands its awareness. You begin to see connections that weren't visible before. You generate new solutions. You experience higher levels of motivation. You become more resilient. You think long-term instead of short-term. And because your thoughts become your neural patterns, the more you practice abundance, the easier it becomes for your brain to operate in that state automatically. This is why the most successful individuals in the world seem to think differently, because they literally do. Their brains have been trained to recognize possibility where others see limitation. They've conditioned themselves to stay calm in uncertainty, to remain focused under pressure, to adapt quickly, and to solve problems creatively. They don't just have a positive attitude, they have a brain wired for expansion. Look at someone like Elon Musk. Neuroscientists who study his cognitive style point out how he uses long-term visioning instead of threat-based decision-making. When most people panic at the thought of losing money, Musk's brain is busy imagining solutions. When others shut down under stress, his mind becomes more active. That's not magic, it's neural conditioning. Years of training his brain to operate from abundance instead of fear. But you don't have to be a billionaire or a genius to rewire your brain. Neuroplasticity works for everyone. Every time you challenge a limiting belief, your brain changes. Every time you choose growth over comfort, your brain changes. Every time you visualize abundance instead of disaster, your brain changes. Every new habit, every new decision, every new emotional pattern becomes part of your neural architecture. Imagine your brain as a forest. Every repeated thought creates a path. Scarcity thoughts create narrow, familiar, well-traveled paths. Your brain takes them automatically because they're easy and deeply carved. Abundance thoughts at first feel like walking through dense, unfamiliar terrain. But the more you walk that path, the clearer it becomes. Eventually, it becomes the dominant path, the path your brain chooses effortlessly. This is why wealthy individuals often talk about thinking differently. They're not being metaphorical. They have literally created different neural pathways that support success. They've trained their minds to see opportunities, make decisions with clarity, embrace uncertainty, and seek solutions instead of excuses. You can do the same. Another powerful scientific aspect of abundance is the reticular activating system, RAS, the part of your brain that filters what you notice. Your RAS determines whether you see opportunities or problems, possibilities or limitations. When your RAS is programmed for scarcity, it filters the world through fear. You notice threats, obstacles, negativity, and reasons why things won't work. When your RAS is programmed for abundance, it filters the world through possibility. You notice ideas, connections, synchronicities, and potential pathways forward. Think of the RAS like a spotlight in your brain. Scarcity aims the spotlight at danger. Abundance aims it at opportunity. And what you consistently think about determines where that spotlight shines. This is why your mindset is not optional. It is neurological. The thoughts you think today determine the brain you build for tomorrow. And the brain you build determines the life you create. Look at athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators who rose to success despite immense challenges. What they all share is not luck, wealth, or perfect beginnings. They share a brain trained to expand instead of contract. Michael Jordan trained his mind to focus on possibility instead of pressure. Steve Jobs trained his mind to imagine the invisible. Oprah trained her mind to rise above trauma. Sarah Blakely trained her mind to see solutions instead of setbacks. Their external results came from internal neurological shifts long before the world saw the evidence. Your brain is always listening to you. When you say, "I can't," it shuts down. When you say, I can learn, it opens pathways. When you say, it's impossible, it stops searching. When you say, there must be a way, it begins looking. Your brain responds to your language, your imagination, your emotional state, and your focus. Your words become your wiring. This is why abundance is not wishful thinking. It is brain training. It is conditioning your mind to operate from a higher, more empowered state. It is teaching your brain to expand instead of contract. It is building neural pathways of courage, clarity, confidence, creativity, and possibility. And the moment your brain shifts, your life shifts. You begin noticing opportunities you used to overlook. You begin attracting people who match your new energy. You begin making decisions that elevate your future instead of protecting your past. You begin trusting yourself at a deeper level. You begin moving with intention instead of fear. You begin thinking like someone preparing for abundance, not someone bracing for disaster. Your brain is the gateway to your wealth. And the moment you choose expansion over fear, abundance over scarcity, possibility over limitation, that is the moment you tap into the science of transformation. Topic 10. Becoming the architect of your reality. How to live, think, and act as someone who attracts abundance naturally. There comes a moment in every person's journey when they realize that life is not happening randomly. It is being shaped, quietly, invisibly, continuously, by the thoughts they repeat, the choices they make, the patterns they follow, and the identity they embody. Most people move through life unconsciously, reacting instead of creating, surviving instead of expanding, wishing instead of becoming. But abundance requires a different level of self-leadership. It requires a moment when you decide, consciously and unapologetically, that you will no longer be a passenger in your own life. You will take the wheel. You will become the architect of your destiny. To live in abundance, you must first understand a simple truth. Everything you experience externally is the echo of something you've created internally. Your results are not accidents. They are reflections. If you want different outcomes, you must rewire the source. Your beliefs, your identity, your mindset, your emotional patterns, your habits. This is where real transformation begins. Abundance becomes natural when you shift from asking, "What do I want?" to asking, "Who must I become to receive what I want?" That is the question wealthy individuals ask, consciously or not. They don't chase outcomes. They evolve into the kind of person who attracts those outcomes. They build the identity, discipline, clarity, courage, and emotional stability required to create what they desire. They don't wait for the world to change. They change themselves. This is why the most successful people rarely talk about luck. They talk about vision. They talk about discipline. They talk about resilience. They talk about mindset. They talk about inner work. Because they know that wealth is not something you stumble into. It is something you align with, something you incrementally build by becoming the person who naturally attracts it. Think of Oprah, who rose from unimaginable hardship to global influence. She didn't just change her circumstances, she changed her identity. She became a woman of substance, compassion, emotional intelligence, leadership, and authenticity. And the world responded. Or consider the founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They didn't just create a search engine, they expanded their minds to see possibilities others couldn't. Their inner state allowed them to imagine solutions at a scale most people wouldn't dare to try. The world didn't hand them abundance. They built themselves into the people capable of creating it. This is the essence of becoming the architect. You design yourself before you design your life. Abundance requires that you step into your power fully, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It requires that you stop negotiating with your limitations, that you stop shrinking your dreams to match your comfort zone, that you stop waiting for permission to live the life you know, deep down, you're meant to live. Scarcity tries to keep you small by convincing you that your circumstances define you. Abundance invites you to rise by showing you that your potential defines you. One of the most important steps in becoming the architect of your reality is taking responsibility. Not blame, but responsibility. Responsibility means you recognize that while you don't control everything that happens to you, you absolutely control how you respond. You control your growth. You control your boundaries. You control who you allow in your life. You control your habits. You control the narratives you feed your mind. You control whether you spend your days consuming fear or practicing faith. Most people never experience abundance because they never take responsibility for their inner world. They wait for life to get easier. They wait for someone to choose them. They wait for motivation. They wait for clarity. They wait for perfect timing. And waiting becomes a lifetime habit. Abundance asks a different question. What can I create right now with what I have from where I am? And the truth is that you can always create something, an idea, a plan, a skill, a connection, a new belief, a new action, a renewed identity. Creation is always available. And the moment you step into creation mode, you step out of survival mode. You begin to move your life forward in ways that compound with remarkable power over time. Another critical part of becoming the architect is learning to make decisions from your future, not your past. Scarcity makes decisions based on fear, memory, and limitation. Abundance makes decisions based on vision, identity, and possibility. When you make decisions from your future self, the version of you who has already achieved the life you desire, you begin aligning your present actions with your future results. And this alignment creates momentum that collapses time. Professional athletes do this. Entrepreneurs do this. Innovators do this. The wealthiest individuals in the world do this. They don't ask, "What am I capable of now?" They ask, "What would the future me do?" And then they act accordingly. They take steps that feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, challenging, because growth always requires stepping into the unknown. And the more you practice acting from your future identity, the faster you become that identity. You also become the architect of your reality when you learn to hold yourself to a higher standard. Abundance has standards. Scarcity has excuses. Abundance says, "This is who I am becoming, and I will act in alignment with that identity." Scarcity says, "This is who I've been, so this is who I must remain." Your standards determine your trajectory. When you raise them, your life rises with them. Abundance also requires that you cultivate emotional mastery. You cannot create prosperity from a chaotic internal state. You cannot build wealth from anxiety, frustration, resentment, or anger. These emotions create mental storms that cloud your judgment and drain your energy. Abundance requires clarity, intention, and inner calm. It requires learning how to regulate your emotions so you don't react from fear, but respond from power. Meditation, journaling, therapy, coaching, spiritual practices, all of these are tools used by the wealthy not because they're trendy, but because they're necessary. You cannot be the architect of your reality if you're emotionally hijacked by your past. The final step in becoming the architect is embracing the truth that abundance is not something you reach. It is something you embody. It is a way of thinking, a way of acting, a way of feeling, a way of being. When you embody abundance, everything in your life begins to align with it. You speak differently. You think differently. You show up differently. You attract differently. You become a magnet for the opportunities that match your identity. Being the architect means choosing your thoughts, choosing your environment, choosing your emotional state, choosing your identity, choosing your actions. It means deciding every day to align with the version of you who is capable of extraordinary things. Abundance is not reserved for the lucky. It is reserved for the conscious. The moment you choose to become the architect of your reality, your life begins to transform. Quietly at first, then unmistakably, then exponentially. And the world begins to respond to the version of you who finally stepped into their power. If there is one truth you take from this entire journey, let it be this: abundance is not something you chase. It's something you awaken. It has always been within you. It has always been waiting for you. Every dream you carry, every vision you imagine, every instinct telling you that you were meant for more. That is abundance calling your name. You are not limited by your past. You are not defined by your fears. You are not trapped by your circumstances. The only thing that has ever stood between you and the life you desire is the mindset you were taught to believe. And now you have the power to rewrite it. Choose expansion. Choose possibility. Choose courage. Choose identity. Choose vision. Choose the future version of yourself who already lives in abundance. When you shift your inner world, your outer world follows. When you change your thoughts, you change your destiny. When you awaken abundance, you awaken your power. And once you step into that version of yourself, life will never look the same again. If this message awakened something inside you, If even one sentence made you stop, breathe, and see yourself differently, then don't let this moment fade. Hold on to it. Let it guide your next step. And if you want to keep transforming your mind, rewiring your beliefs, and stepping deeper into the abundance you deserve, then stay connected with this channel. Subscribe now so you never miss the tools, the insights, the truths, and the breakthroughs that will help you build the life you're meant to live. If this video brought clarity to your journey, give it a like so more people can find it. Share it with someone you love, someone who is ready to rise, someone who deserves abundance as much as you do. And let me know in the comments what part of this video touched you the most. Your voice matters here. Your journey matters here. And every time you express it, you strengthen the identity of the person you are becoming. This is your moment. This is your shift. This is the beginning of your abundance.